All right, I'm picking up right where I left off in the last reverb to talk about the other kind of reverb that is available in Reaper. Let's hear where we left off. We had used Reverbate, the algorithmic built-in reverb. And what's nice about Reverbate is you don't need anything else to run it. You'll see what I mean in a moment. This is where we left. Let's just make sure everything's working here. And I remind you that I can check the send of each channel individually, or I can go into the reverb. This is great about Reaper. I can hit route and I can see all of the sends coming in. So this says received from track 1, and I can turn this up if I want a little bit more reverb. Turn this one up, track 2 from ratio piano. And I think actually that sounds pretty good. But there's a whole other world of reverb available to us, and that comes from the other plugin. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to disable this one now, and on the same effects channel right after it, this is so we can easily compare, I'm going to add the other one, Reverb. Simpler name, slightly more complicated. This is a convolution reverb, which means it uses impulse responses, which are recordings of acoustic spaces, and the reverb profile of acoustic spaces. There are several different ways these are generated, sometimes with like a balloon pop or a hand clap, sometimes with like a frequency pan of the whole spectrum. But the idea is that an impulse response attempts to capture the acoustic response of a physical space, or sometimes of an effects unit or a speaker cabinet. Very specific sound. So this makes available to you a wider range of reverb sounds, and also sometimes can generate very realistic reverb. So I'm going to add this. And you're going to see right now that when I just add this, it actually does nothing. I'll turn my wet up to there. I'll turn my dry down to here. And when I play my track now, totally dry. And the reason is that we actually, for this reverb, we're going to need to load an impulse response, or some kind of way for the impulse to be generated. Now, you're going to have to download impulse responses. There are tons of them available on the internet for free. I'm going to post a link to this site almost randomly, where there are 4 different libraries of responses. They're not huge. You're going to need to download them. And once you download them, then let's go back to Reaper here. You can choose add a file, and we'll leave those other ones off for now. I'm going to add file. And I can, I'll show you a couple that I have to choose from. This is from a Roland reverb unit. And I've got all of these kind of various iterations. And then I also from that website, I have this really cool Echo Thief impulse responses, which are kind of from strange places like underground spaces and underpasses. And let's start with the more straight ahead one first. Let's go to just the VS8F. And I'm going to choose something really sort of inoffensive. Let's try medium room. And let's open that up. And now you're going to see the file type there. And I've switched this to be mostly wet. And you'll see we've got some of the same controls we had before. We've got the pre-reverb. We've got the width and the pan. We don't have an EQ, and I'll talk about that probably at the end of this video. Let's see what this sounds like. It sounds pretty good. I think we could actually maybe turn up the reverb to really get a sense of what it sounds like. Let's see what happens. Let's compare that to the Reverbate. not bad. Now, what's nice about this is once I've got that file open on Reverb, I can go in and just experiment with changes. So as we play, it's a cool play. I'll show you some of those other responses, which can get pretty interesting. So let's go to Echo Thief response library. And let's see, what's a good sound? Let's just experiment. The Mills Art Museum, right? So you want your music to sound like it's being played in an art museum? Now notice it's suddenly much louder, so I'm going to go in, different impulses respond differently, and I'm going to pull the sends way down and see if I can not overload my system. So now we're getting into a space that's quite different sounding than the original. Let's go back to Reverb. Sometimes, if I just solo the drums, gives you an idea of some interesting kind of sonic possibilities. Now we might want to pull down the overall level of reverb there. And it's important that you understand when I pull down the level of the send to the reverb, what I'm doing is I'm increasing the ratio of the dry sound to the wet sound. So now this is... Let's turn this all off. So that's the basic idea of using, now we'll call this Reverb, not Reverbate. I did it on the same one here so we could sort of A-B the different sounds. Really just get a sense of some differences. Now, you don't have an EQ here. What you can do, and what people often do, is to add an EQ after the reverb. Actually, sometimes people do it before. I'm going to do it after right now. I'm going to add re-EQ. And we haven't talked about equalization at all. So this is what I'm going to do to make this very simple is I'm going to... let's see if I can do it. Remove band. I'm going to remove these couple of bands. You don't have to do that. I just want to make a 2-band EQ, and all I want to use, when I click 1, I'm going to set this to high pass, and when I click 2, I'm going to set this to low pass, right? So I'm not getting into any fancy EQ. I'm just going to kind of control the range. And very often you'll see people EQ reverbs in this way. This is the equivalent to the high pass and low pass filters that were on the Reverb plugin. And the idea is that that low frequency reverb can just be really muddy and can gunk up a mix, and that high frequency reverb can just be really synthetic and metallic sounding. So I tend to almost always move in this direction with reverbs, but then depending on what reverb you're using, you might really custom make that. Let's see what the Pabst Brewery sound. Now it's, again, you have to go back, make sure, and actually the best place to adjust is from the reverb because you have all the sends, right? And now... very, and so in this case, you might feel like, wow, that's really mid-range heavy. And maybe it's just a bad impulse response. It's pretty nasty. But you get the idea. You really have a lot of sonic possibilities here, and just don't go into the red like I did. So that's Reverb. That's an introduction to the Reverb Convolution plugin. Hope you have fun with that if you choose to use it, and I'll see you again soon.